Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Her True Stories, where we share incredible real-life stories of survival, strength, and triumph. Before we begin today's powerful story, I want to remind you that if you've ever been told you're too old to start over, let me tell you, that's a lie. Your story isn't over, and you still have chapters left to write. Our best-selling book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain, is filled with simple, powerful steps to help you heal, rebuild, and fall in love with life again. Click the link in the description box and start your new beginning today. Now, let's dive into today's incredible story of resurrection and revenge. They say bridges are for crossing, but I've learned they're just as good for hiding. The concrete beams groan when trucks thunder above, shaking dust down on my blanket, but the sound is almost comforting. No one looks down here. No one dares. That's why I chose it. At 62, I should be drinking wine on a veranda, running my hands across the mahogany rail of a house I once called mine. Instead, I sleep beside my dog, Ivy, wrapped in an old coat that smells of rain and mildew. Ivy doesn't complain. Dogs never do. They love you without conditions, something my daughter never understood. It was dusk when I first saw the lights. The kind of gleaming beams you only get from money, xenon headlights, tinted windows, an engine that purred like it belonged to a predator, not a car. SUVs don't stop under bridges. Not unless they're lost or hunting. I froze. That's what you do when you've lived invisible. You learn that movement is dangerous, that the sound of your breath can give you away. Ivy growled low in her throat. Then the door opened. He stepped out slowly, tailored slacks cutting through the grime of the underpass like a blade through silk. He had my husband's chin, that same stubborn, square jawline. But the eyes were wrong. Steel gray, sharp, searching. Eyes that had seen things, measured them, and decided which to cut down. Asher, I whispered, before my brain even caught up with my mouth. The young man's head snapped toward me. He froze the way hunters do when they realize the deer knows it's being stalked. He took a step forward, and his voice came out low, like he already knew the answer but wanted to hear me say it. Grandmother? The word carved through me like glass dragged across porcelain. I hadn't heard it in years. According to my daughter, Vanessa, I was dead. Buried. Ashes scattered. Tears wept. And yet here I was, shivering under a bridge, alive, while my own flesh and blood believed my grave was real. I straightened my back, pulling dignity around me like a shawl. Yes, I said simply. Not with relief. Not with joy. But with a kind of cold certainty that comes when a secret can no longer be contained. He stepped closer. The expensive scent of his cologne cut through the piss-stained air. He looked down at Ivy, who pressed closer to me, her ribs visible through her fur. What the hell is this? His voice carried disbelief and something else. Anger, maybe. My mother said. Your mother lies. I cut in. My tone was ice, sharp and clean. I wasn't going to tremble, wasn't going to explain. She always has. Asher blinked, like the truth had been waiting just behind his eyelids, and now it finally clawed its way out. He looked at me again, really looked. The cheekbones he knew from portraits. The auburn streaks in my hair that I refused to cover with dye. The scar on my left wrist from when I fell as a girl. You can bury a woman on paper, but the body remembers. Get in the car, he said finally. Not a question. A command. I didn't argue. I slid Ivy under my arm, gathered what little I owned, a threadbare satchel with a cracked leather handle, and walked to the SUV as though I still belonged in cars like that. Asher opened the door for me, and for a flicker of a moment, I almost saw the boy he must have been, the boy I never got to raise. Inside, the seats hugged me with their expensive leather. The heater blasted warmth that burned my frozen skin. Ivy curled against my thigh. I let my fingers trace the stitching on the seat, Not because I cared, but because I wanted to remember what had been stolen from me. Asher slid into the driver's seat and looked at me sideways. Do you know what this means? Yes, I said flatly. It means the lies are unraveling. He didn't press. He drove in silence, the engine humming like a well-fed beast. I watched the city lights slide past, each one a reminder of the life I'd been cut out of. Every skyscraper, every glowing billboard, my name should have still meant something in this town. Instead, Vanessa had erased it. Ivy's head rested on my lap. I stroked her ears, calm, calculating. Asher gripped the wheel. His jaw clenched with thoughts I couldn't read yet. Finally, he spoke. She told me you were dead, that you died before I was even a teenager. There was a funeral, an urn, photographs. Fabricated, I said. All of it. Why? His voice cracked at the edges, but his eyes stayed hard. I turned my gaze to the window. The reflection showed me exactly what I wanted him to see. A woman scarred but not broken, stripped of everything but not begging for pity. Because, I whispered, your mother wanted more than her share. The words hung between us like a loaded gun. He pulled into a gated driveway, the kind that hummed with hidden cameras and silent alarms. The gates swung open without hesitation. I raised an eyebrow. Your house. No, he said. His lips curled into something between a smirk and a snarl. Yours. The SUV rolled to a stop in front of a mansion. Not just any mansion, my mansion. The columns, the stone facade, the carved initials over the entrance that my husband had commissioned decades ago. Only the gardens looked different, manicured to someone else's taste. I stepped out slowly, Ivy at my side. My feet touched the gravel, like I was walking on bones. Every window gleamed, but none of them recognized me. Inside, the walls were lined with portraits. My face, but altered. Softer, blurred at the edges. The lines around my eyes airbrushed away. My jewelry gone, replaced with gaudy pieces Vanessa must have chosen. It was like looking at a ghost painted by a forger. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. She even stole my wrinkles. Asher followed me inside, watching every flicker of my expression. You should know, he said quietly, this isn't just about property. There's more. I turned to him. Tell me. He took a breath, his shoulders tense like he was holding the weight of a secret that had been eating him alive. She didn't just fake your death. She rerouted everything. Every dollar, every trust, every asset into her name. She used your forged death certificate to claim the foundation, the estate, the accounts. She made herself me. I finished for him. Yes. I nodded once, slow and deliberate. The anger was there, burning hot, but I didn't let it show. Anger is noise. Revenge is silence. Good, I said at last. Then I know exactly what I'm taking back. The front doors opened with the same old sigh, as if the hinges still remembered the weight of my hands. Inside, heat gathered in the foyer like a breath held too long. My face looked back at me from every gilded frame, my bones, my angle of chin, but softened as if a stranger had pressed 2 fingers over my edges. Even the painter's signature had been replaced. Not a signature, really, but a brand, the kind that flatters people who fear time. Careful, I said to Ivy as she trotted over the marble and sniffed the base of a Corinthian column. They worship surfaces here. Asher locked the door behind us and thumbed a control panel I'd installed 20 years ago, before everything became touchscreen and condescension. The panel chirped. The alarms sunk back into their wall cavities like reptiles easing into mud. He knew the codes. That interested me. He looked comfortable in this air, which meant he'd been here before without announcing it. Good. A grandson who snoops is worth more than a son who obeys. Kitchen, he asked, pointing toward the south corridor. Study, I said. And not the one your mother parades her donors through. My husband's. He nodded as if he'd already taken inventory of the house's psychologies. The room for angels, the room for sinners, the room where money learned to multiply. He led, but he looked back to see if I approved of his route. I didn't smile. Approval is a currency you spend only in famine. The study hadn't changed. It couldn't. A room used to thinking develops mass of its own. The walnut shelves bowed with the old weight of law reports and ledgers, and the leather chairs had the particular gloss that comes from patience, not polish. I walked to the desk and placed my palm flat on it, feeling for the thin crack near the right corner, where the grain forked. There it was, a bristle, small as a memory, and twice as sharp. Proof that age won the fight with varnish. Asher flicked on a banker's lamp. Green shade. Warm cone of light. He reached into his jacket pocket and laid a phone on the blotter between us. A private model, not the kind boys take selfies with. Then he added a second device that looked like a black deck of cards. He didn't have to tell me what it was. Its shape betrayed it. Secure drive, hardware encryption, the sort of thing men use when their lives depend on silence. I don't bring paper into houses I don't own, he said. This will be enough. He booted the drive. A logo I didn't recognize swam across the phone, a discreet consultancy, no doubt. Files populated the screen in a list that scrolled and scrolled, PDFs, JPG scans, XMLs, the true language of theft. Names leapt out like teeth. Wilder and Keene LLP. Hart Family Foundation. State of California Department of Public Health. Office of Vital Records. The last one made my pulse skitter in my wrist the way it always does when a cut starts to close. Not pain, but the sharp comeback of blood. Start with the death certificate, I said. He tapped. The document opened, and for a moment the room tilted, just a fraction, the way it does when you stand up too fast after pretending for too long that you're asleep. There it was, my name, my date of birth, my so-called death, the cause. Cardiopulmonary arrest. Neat. Clinical. A kind lie, which is the cruelest kind. The attending physician field was filled with a name I didn't know, Lawrence Lehman, MD, and a signature that slashed diagonally across the page with the confidence of a man used to stamping the last word. The certifying official had a different flourish. The paper trail included a cremation permit, an urn receipt, and a form authorizing the release of remains to a private cemetery I'd never liked. It was all there, clean and complete, as if I'd had the courtesy to die without complaint. See the timestamp, Asher said, zooming in. Filed at 9:17 a.m., 2 days after you supposedly died. The clinic listed here isn't equipped to pronounce a death. It's a wellness clinic for drips, hydration, that sort of theater. I spoke with a nurse who remembered a rush job for a high-profile family. The rush job being my funeral, I said. And the high-profile being your mother's appetite. He slid to the next file, my signature, an electronic script granting power of attorney to Vanessa 3 months before my so-called death. The shape of the letters was my shape. I'd taught my hand to make that shape. But there was a hesitation between Elizabeth and Hart. A breath I never take when I write my own name. Whoever copied it had practiced the flourish and missed the cadence. I remembered the day I taught Vanessa to sign her full name without dots for the I's, how I told her that a true signature never needs decoration because it is a form of presence. I remembered the way her small hand hunched over the paper, greedy for adulthood without understanding the terms. I let the memory pass through me like a visitor at a museum who pays, points, and moves on. She used this POA to access the trust? I asked. Yes. Wilder and Keene drafted a contingency succession plan for the Hart Family Foundation and the marital trust. Hidden under the assumption that your death was imminent, the board was reconstituted with your proxies. 3 men with no original standing except proximity to your daughter. He pulled up a diagram. Lines and boxes. A simple thing if you didn't care about souls. The trust my husband had set up decades ago was meant to pass to me and then to issue of the marriage. Specific language, old-fashioned and precise, meant to close doors on opportunists. Somehow the doors had been removed and replaced with revolving glass. The foundation became the mouth, Asher said, tracing the lines. From there, disbursements to a donor-advised fund, then consulting fees to a third-party management entity, Heart Meridian Partners, that coincidentally incorporated the week after your death certificate posted. Coincidentally, I said. He grimaced. Coincidences like these were your jewelry. I took the phone from him. The next file was a set of photos. The mansion's deed transfer. The property tax forms. Declarations of charitable use for certain rooms so she could deduct the cost of her self-portrait masquerading as philanthropy. A photograph of the entry hall, my hall, with a ribbon across the door and a mayor smiling at a plaque that bore my name but thanked Vanessa. The mayor would have been happier in newer money, but he'd make do with old money if old money behaved like a mirror.
Keep going, I said.
He hesitated at the next folder. The moment told me the file was about a man. My father, he said quietly. I nodded once, inviting the knife. He opened a scanned memo from a private investigator. Subject: Thomas Reed's inquiries. I read the summary. Asher's father had started asking questions 6 months after my death, when a quarterly distribution to the family holding company didn't arrive on schedule. He emailed a partner at Wilder and Keene and CC'd a tax counsel at an outside firm. He was polite. He didn't accuse. He simply asked for an accounting consistent with the estate plan he believed still governed the family's money. The next page reported a meeting that never made it onto a calendar, a conversation under the table between the partner and a man whose name appeared only as initials. Then a note in the margin in the investigator's scrawl. Boat.
Night. No mon.
A grainy photograph showed a marina. Another showed a life jacket half-inflated and drifting like a lie that forgot what it promised. He drowned, Asher said. His voice was flat the way metal goes flat when it's been hammered too long. They called it a tragic accident during a solo night ride. But he never went out at night. He was a morning man. He hated the dark water. And your mother? She cried like she'd been stabbed through the soul, and then the week of the funeral she filed new board resolutions. He pinched the bridge of his nose and looked down, a motion that had nothing of boy in it. I started looking after that. At first because I needed to know he hadn't done something stupid. And then because the numbers were wrong in a way that felt designed.
Designed.
The word pleased me, though not for the usual reasons. Uncovering design is the first step toward demolition. Show me her face, I said. He looked confused. In here, I said, tapping the files. Greed has a face. I want to see it. He opened email chains. Vanessa's voice, transmuted into emoji and over-punctuation, the digital perfume of a woman who believes her smile can refurbish facts. Can we accelerate DA fund transfer? Need to close on Montecito property by end of month. Another, media outreach. Remind them foundation is my mother's legacy. We're honoring her wishes. May she rest. May she rest, I repeated, enjoying the way the words turned to salt on my tongue. How pious. He scrolled. One email had an attachment labeled eulogies_final, PDF. I refused to open it. There are limits to indecency, even for me, and I have no appetite for counterfeit grief. We sat in silence long enough for the lamp to hum. When I finally looked up from the screen, I saw that Asher hadn't been watching the files. He'd been watching me. Measuring. He had learned that from her. What he hadn't learned from her was the pleasure of underestimation. He overcredits people. I would teach him economy. You're very calm, he said. The dead don't panic, I said, and set the phone down. And I've been dead on paper for years. It's a good training ground for resurrection. His mouth twitched again, his version of a smile. You want to talk next steps? Not yet. I stood, the old leather chair complaining in the same register it used to use when my husband stayed up too late reading depositions. First, I want to take inventory of what she thinks can't be touched. We walked the house. Ivy followed, nails ticking on tile with a clean sound that put the lie to the plush. The dining room was the worst. Some decorator's vision of grandeur. Vases as tall as men to distract from the fact that meals eaten there could only happen if everyone spoke in a dialect of charity. Vanessa had hung a mirror where we used to hang maps. The mirror was a better landscape for her. In the breakfast nook, sunlight from the moon made a stain on the stone counter where I used to roll pastry dough at 4 a.m. You can tell a home by where the stains live. I pressed my finger there and felt the grit. Ivy sneezed. Room for you is upstairs, Asher said. West Wing. She's in Montecito tonight for a donor dinner. He watched my face for offense at the word room, and when he found none, he added, temporary. The point is to move, not to unpack. Correct, I said. I'm not here to nest. I'm here to count. He showed me the guest suite he'd prepared not for comfort, but for war. White linens, white walls, a wardrobe of neutrals in my size. I raised an eyebrow. You guessed at my measurements? Asked a tailor who keeps his mouth shut, he said. And a hairdresser who doesn't. I opened the wardrobe, ran my fingers along the silk of a blouse with the thinnest pinstripe, and closed it. These will do when it's time to be seen. He lifted a small suitcase to the bed. I bought toiletries you like. He said it like an apology he didn't want me to think was weakness. Ivy leapt onto the bed and turned in a circle the way creatures who remember softness do when they want to forgive the world for a few hours. I should have ordered her down. I didn't. A queen may grant clemency. It costs nothing and confuses the guilty. Yeah, Asher asked. Scotch, I said. He returned with a decanter and 2 small tumblers, though I noticed he only poured one. He had his father's restraint about poison. I took a mouthful and let it bloom down my throat, heat tripping all the old alarms on the way. For a moment, I let my eyes close. The sound from beyond the windows was the same as it always had been, trees asking the wind to choose a side. Why now? I asked without looking at him. What made you pull off under that bridge tonight? He took longer than men usually take to answer a direct question, which meant the answer would be worth hearing. I found a ledger, he said. Not in a bank. In a man's pocket. The man with initials, I said. He nodded. He fell out of favor with my mother. When people fall out of favor with her, they lose the parts of their face that look human. He was trying to sell insurance before the erasure went all the way. I paid for a page. The ledger didn't say much, but it said enough. The entry for the night my father died used a phrase they wouldn't use if it had been an accident. Which phrase? He looked at me, as if saying it out loud would brand him with it. Problem solved. We let the words sit on the white duvet like blood on snow. No tears. No fury. Just the addition of numbers to the column that already contained my death, and the looting of the future. What do you want from me, Asher? I asked. Clarity? Permission? A weapon? He leaned his elbows on his knees and folded his hands. Not prayer, but something kin to it. I want your name to be the thing it was meant to be, he said. And I want her to lose everything she thinks is permanent. We agree, I said. We went back downstairs to the study. He pulled up more files. I made notes in my head because paper leaves trails and I didn't intend to leave anything behind until I was ready to publish a map. We set the first contours of a sequence that would not look like strategy to anyone who believed in apologies. Step 1, he said, we need to establish your legal existence. Resurrection, I said. The clerks will enjoy the theology. I can arrange biometrics, a witness statement, and a court order to open sealed records, he said. Quietly. But there's risk. The more we move, the more she notices.
Good, I said.
I want her to feel the air change. He swiped to a contact screen. Lawyers. Investigators. A notary whose name I recognized from a lunch where ambition drank too much water and called itself caution. You'll need to sign affidavits, he said. I will not sign anything drafted by Wilder and Keene or their satellites, I said. We'll use your counsel for mechanics, not for judgment. Judgment is mine. He inclined his head. Understood. We talked timelines, not dates. Dates are brittle. They break with pressure. Timelines flex and refuse to look surprised. While we worked, the house settled around us, as if trying to decide whether to accept my presence or spit me out. Houses pick sides. I kept my voice low, and even so the walls would remember how authority sounds. When the clock on the mantel reached midnight, I stood. Ivy woke, leapt down from the sofa where she'd pretended to nap, and actually listened, and shook herself. The sound was small and absolute. There's a guest room, Asher said again, not because he thought I hadn't heard him the first time, but because men believe in the ritual of offering a bed as if it constitutes hospitality. It does not. Shelter is not kindness when you have stolen a roof. I will rest, I said. Resting is not sleeping. Don't confuse the two. He gathered the devices and slipped them back into his pocket and the black deck. He was careful with the drive, the way boys are careful with knives when they've just learned they cut both ways. In the corridor, we passed one of the altered portraits. The forger had softened my eyes into something like mercy. I stopped and cocked my head. She paid someone to take the edge off me, I said. That's a confession in pigment. I can send the painter's name, Asher said. If you want to. Later, I said. We'll restore what can be restored. Destroy what cannot. At the threshold of the West Wing, he turned. I have one question. Only one. I said. You disappoint me. He let that pass. Do you want your name back? He asked softly. Or, do you want her gone? The question was clean, not because it was simple, but because it drew a line across a map nobody else had the nerve to draw. He needed to know. People want to believe in proportionality. It makes them feel safe. But proportionality is a myth we hand to children so they won't grow up cruel. I was not a child. Cruelty has a use when it is accurate. Both, I said. I held his gaze until he understood there would be no negotiation about that. Then I closed the door to the suite, untied my coat, and hung it in a wardrobe not mine but obedient in the way expensive objects are. Ivy jumped up on the bed again and looked at me with a sort of trust one I've never seen in a human eye. I allowed it to stand. One night on cotton for a creature who has never taken anything from me is not a weakness. It is a decree. I washed my hands in the marble basin, dried them on linen too stiff to be honest, and looked at my face in the mirror hung above the sink. The house's lights made a white band across my forehead. The shadows made parentheses around my mouth. I lifted my hair and pinned it away from my neck. The bones there are straight and narrow, the way my husband used to describe rivers on a survey map, promising until someone dams them. I lay down without taking off my shoes. There is a ritual to returning to a place that pretended to forget you. You do not surrender to its softness. You make it work for you. The ceiling above me was smooth plaster. I knew where the hairline crack would run from the chandelier's medallion toward the window. It always did after winter storms. I closed my eyes and traced the crack's probable course in my mind, the way men trace campaign routes on a relief map. Sleep came in strict, disciplined slices. Between them, I listened to the house breathe. Sometime toward morning, I woke with the certainty that not all ghosts in this place were mine. I rose and padded barefoot into the hallway. There are sounds the oldest wood makes, the tick of expansion, the sigh of weight settling, and then there are the sounds a photograph makes when a draft lifts its corner. I followed that whisper to the small sitting room at the end of the hall where Vanessa used to pretend to read. The lamps were off. The window was cracked, just enough to invite in a thread of air. On the wall above the fireplace hung a portrait I hadn't noticed earlier, not of me, not of my husband, but of Vanessa. The painter caught her while she wasn't looking, which is to say, he caught her truth. Ambition makes an aperture of the eyes. If you look closely, you can see what it intends to swallow. I reached up and straightened the frame. It had been tilted, but not by accident. People tilt things to make them look alive. I prefer them square. Back in the bedroom, Ivy grumbled in her sleep and rolled onto her back in surrender to a dream uncomplicated by property law. I knelt and scratched her chest until her paws twitched. "We will be precise," I told her. "Precision is the mercy we offer ourselves." At first light, I showered, dressed in a cream blouse and a jacket the color of contempt, and twisted my hair into the kind of chignon that has never lost an argument. Asher was already downstairs, tie off, sleeves rolled, like men in catalogs who want you to think they've been working before you rose. He had brewed coffee but left mine untouched, as if choosing my first sip on my first morning back would insult the final bit of sovereignty I owned.
Wise.
"We start today," he said. "We started the moment you said grandmother," I said. "Today we escalate." He slid a thin folder across the island. "Not a drive. Not a phone.
Paper."
I raised an eyebrow.
"Copies," he said.
"You said no paper until we publish. This paper is meant to be found by the right person at the right moment." I opened it. Inside, a notarized affidavit template, a list of county offices, a name I recognized, an old notary we used in the days when a signature still meant you'd stand by your words if asked at dawn. The notary had put his stamp on clean things and on questionable things. I trusted him to fear the right people at the right time. "Breakfast?" Asher asked. "Victory," I said. "Later." We stepped into the morning together. The house watched us go. I did not look back. Looking back makes monuments of thieves. On the gravel, the cold bit the ankles exposed by shoes I had chosen not for comfort, but for the sound they would make on courthouse floors. Asher opened the SUV door. Ivy jumped in without asking permission. I slid into the passenger seat and rested my hand on the center console where, years ago, I had rested my hand on my husband's knee while he drove us to meetings that would build a life worth stealing. Asher started the engine. The gates parted. The city beyond waited, stuffed with small men who believed forms determine reality, and one woman who knew better. He glanced at me, that almost smile threatening again. "Resurrection papers first," he said. "Then the bank," I said. "Then the man who used the word problem to describe a human being." He nodded. Then we choose a room full of donors," I said, fastening my seatbelt like a weapon. "And we let truth do what it does when it is finally given a microphone." The SUV rolled forward. The sunlight cut a blade across the hood. In my lap, Ivy licked an old scar on my wrist, and I let her because scars deserve witnesses. My daughter thought she was the author of this story. She forgot that the dead can write endings when they decide to get up. "Name back," I said, as much to the road as to him. "And her gone." "Both," he said. "Both," I repeated, and watched the mansion shrink in the side mirror until it became a problem for later. The morning after my return to the house, I rose with the discipline of someone who had survived long without clocks. The light was thin, a winter blade carving its way through gauze curtains. Ivy stood at the door, tail twitching, as if she too knew we were not here to rest. Today was about resurrection. Not the sentimental kind priests mutter about at gravesides, but the bureaucratic kind, the resurrection that lives in sealed records and signed affidavits. A resurrection that turns deceased into dangerous. Asher was waiting in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, coffee in hand. He looked like a man rehearsing competence for the mirror. His tie was loose, but his eyes were sharp. "The county office opens in an hour," he said. "I've already arranged an appointment. Discreet clerk, old friend of my father's. He'll handle the intake without raising alarms." I set Ivy's bowl on the floor and watched her lap water like it was currency. Good. We'll need more than discretion. We'll need a trail so clean it looks like it was never scrubbed at all. He nodded, sliding a manila folder across the table. Inside were affidavits, biometric requisitions, and a draft petition for correction of vital records. I skimmed, noting every place my forged death had been signed into history: certificate, cremation permit, estate filings. Each document was a weapon, one my daughter had pointed at me, one I would now aim back at her. "I want the notary first," I said. "The one who stamped my forged signature." "He's nervous," Asher replied. "I called last night. He remembered you. Said you had a way of making men do things without saying much. Then he'll remember what happens when men forget their place." We drove downtown. The county building was a brutalist slab of concrete pretending to be important. I walked through its doors as though I owned the marble beneath my shoes. People parted the way they do for women who look like they know the ending of a story. The clerk's desk was buried in files, but he straightened when he saw me. He must have recognized my name, though on his records it belonged to a ghost. His hands trembled slightly as he offered a seat. "Mrs. Hart?" he asked, voice pitched low. "Alive," I said flatly, "and very aware of the crime committed in my absence." Asher handled the legal choreography, presenting biometrics, photo IDs, affidavits sworn by him as kin. I simply sat there, spine unyielding, eyes fixed on the clerk until sweat formed at his temple. "This will take some time," he murmured. "We'll need to verify the physician's attestation." "Do that," I said. "And when you call him, tell him I'd like to shake the hand that certified my death without ever touching my body. We'll see how steady it is then." The clerk swallowed hard and typed faster. From there, we visited the notary. He lived in a faded apartment with Venetian blinds that snapped shut the moment he recognized me. But Asher had already wedged a foot in the door. I stepped inside uninvited, Ivy patting at my heel. He was older now, hair gone thin, hands shaking as he fumbled for a cigarette. "I didn't want to." "She said it was urgent. She said it was what you wanted." "Vanessa," I finished for him. "And you believed her?" I saw her paperwork. The law firm vouched. They said you were
Dead.
I smiled thinly. "You of all people should know a signature doesn't make a death." His eyes darted to Asher, then back to me. "What do you want from me?"
Truth.
"Signed, sealed, stamped." He hesitated until I reached into my satchel and pulled out the forged affidavit, the one bearing my crookedly imitated hand. "This," I said, holding it up to his nose. "You tell the court who really signed it. You admit you never saw me. You admit you took money for a fraud." He looked at the paper as if it were a lit fuse. Then his shoulders sagged. "All right," he whispered. "All right." He signed Asher's prepared statement, hand trembling so badly the ink blotted. I watched, unblinking, until the seal clicked shut. When we left, Asher asked, "You think he'll hold?" "He'll hold," I said. Fear is more permanent than loyalty. That afternoon, we walked into the private bank where my accounts had once lived. The manager, a slick man with a smile too wide, blinked at me like he'd seen a ghost. Which, of course, he had. "Mrs. Hart, this is unexpected. Resurrection tends to be," I said. "Now open my file." He stammered about protocols, authorizations, signatures. I leaned forward across his polished desk, letting my voice cut the air. "You will correct the ledger, or you will explain to a judge why a dead woman still draws breath in your lobby." His hand shook as he keyed in access. My balances flashed on screen, 0, drained into Vanessa's shells. But the trail remained, every transfer coded, every date stamped. I tapped the screen. Print it. All of it. Then lock the system. From this moment on, every penny moved is obstruction of justice. He printed. I gathered the stack, pages warm from the machine. They felt like bones in my hands. Proof that something once alive had been stripped, catalogued, and buried. By dusk, we had affidavits, biometric confirmations, notarized reversals, and bank records stacked neatly in Asher's briefcase. He drove us home, his jaw set like a man learning the taste of iron. "You don't flinch," he said finally. "Most people, seeing their death certificate, their money stolen, their life erased, they'd crumble. You don't even blink." "Blinking," I said, staring out at the city lights, "is for people who believe tears can fix a ledger. I don't. I only believe in precision. And tomorrow, Vanessa will learn that her mother has risen, not to embrace her, but to bury her properly this time." Ivy shifted in the back seat, sighing like she understood. Asher glanced at me, hesitant. What if she tries to make amends? To settle quietly? I laughed once, sharp as glass. Then she'll discover that resurrection is not mercy. It's war. The next morning I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was time to step out of shadows and let Vanessa see me. Not in secret, not whispered about, but in full view. The living ghost at her gala. I dressed for war. A black suit tailored to the inch, pearls at my throat, hair twisted high. Not mourning clothes, executioners. Ivy watched from the bed as I applied lipstick the shade of arterial blood. She tilted her head as if to ask if this was armor.
It was.
Asher met me in the hall, eyes widening just slightly. "You look alive." I cut in. "That's the point. The gala was being held at the City Museum, a glittering parasite of glass and steel. I'd walked its halls decades ago, when I still believed in art as legacy. Tonight it would host Vanessa's latest masquerade, another charity event laundering her greed into applause. We arrived late, by design. The red carpet glowed under camera flashes, journalists calling Vanessa's name as she posed in a gown too new, diamonds too bright. She smiled that manufactured smile, teeth flashing as if nothing in her world had seams. And then I stepped out of the car. Gasps rippled. Cameras turned. A murmur surged like a wave breaking against rocks. For a moment, no one knew whether to gasp in horror or click in delight. The whispers began. "Isn't she dead? That's her. My God, it's her." Vanessa froze mid-pose. Her smile faltered. Our eyes met across the flood of flashes. She went pale beneath her makeup, but she didn't move. Predators don't run in public. I didn't speak. I simply walked past her, chin high, Ivy trotting at my side on a silver leash. The cameras caught the image, the daughter glowing with stolen glamour, the mother resurrected, silent as judgment. Inside, the gala glittered with crystal and falseness. Donors clinked glasses, unaware that their money was stitched into fraud. I moved among them like a queen inspecting courtiers. Faces turned, whispers chased me through the room. I approached the largest donor. A defense contractor, slick hair, Rolex gleaming. He extended a polite hand, confusion etched across his face. "Mrs. Hart, we were told." "You were told many things," I interrupted. "Not one of them true, but I'll give you one truth." I slipped a slim folder into his hand. "This is how your donations have been diverted into shell accounts, personal real estate, jet fuel. Not charity. Theft." His face darkened as he skimmed. This is serious." "Indeed. And you'll decide whether to keep feeding her or whether to cut the vein she drinks from. Choose carefully." He excused himself, already dialing a number. I didn't seek Vanessa out. I didn't need to. Every step I took was a knife pressed against her throat. She tried to smile, tried to laugh too loudly at someone's joke, but her eyes followed me like a shadow that knew it was about to be burned away. Asher stayed at my shoulder, silent. A presence, not protection. I didn't need protection. I needed witness. The evening wound down, speeches faltering as attention drifted to me. Finally, Vanessa attempted to reclaim the stage. She clinked a glass, forced a laugh, and began her well-rehearsed monologue about legacy and charity. I didn't interrupt. I simply stood at the edge of the crowd where the cameras could see me, my face cold, unyielding. Every donor turned to look at me instead of her. Her words died in her throat. For the first time in her life, Vanessa had no audience. When the gala ended, I slipped out without a word. Outside, the cold air felt like triumph. Asher walked beside me, shaking his head. You said nothing, and yet you said everything. That's the advantage of resurrection, I murmured. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to appear. That night, as we returned to the mansion, I poured myself a glass of water and stared at my altered portrait on the wall. The forger had tried to soften me, erase the edges. But tonight, the world had seen the truth. The edges were back, sharp as ever. I raised the glass in a silent toast. To faces that cannot be rewritten. Ivy wagged her tail once, as if in agreement. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. Money leaves a trail, even when bodies don't. That's the lesson I repeated to myself the morning after the gala, standing in the kitchen of the mansion that once belonged to me. The smell of coffee lingered, sharp and bitter. Ivy lay at my feet, paws twitching in sleep, dreaming of a chase she'd never lose. Across the island, Asher sat with his laptop open, screen glowing blue in the half-light. The numbers reflected in his eyes made him look like a man possessed, not by greed, but by fury. She's built 3 nodes, he said, voice clipped. The Foundation, Heart Meridian Partners, and a Cayman account. They funnel into each other like veins into a heart. Except the heart isn't charity. It's her. I leaned on the counter, pearls cool against my throat. And if we cut the veins, she bleeds. I smiled thinly, then sharpened the knife. The plan unfolded with precision. Asher's forensic accountant, a man with the complexion of a ghost and the hands of a pianist, met us in the study. He spread spreadsheets across the desk like maps of a battlefield. Here, he said, tapping with a manicured finger. The consulting firm invoices. They're identical, month after month, rounded figures, no breakdown. Classic laundering. And here, I added, pointing to another column, is the donor-advised fund. Large contributions in, small disbursements out. The rest disappears offshore. The accountant looked at me, startled. You understand this? I fixed him with a stare that could have peeled paint. I lived with a man who built empires out of contracts. I signed every page. Don't insult me by assuming I can't read theft when it wears perfume. He flushed and nodded quickly. By mid-morning, we had the documentation compiled. Fraudulent invoices, duplicate transfers, shell incorporations with the same post office box. It was a latticework of arrogance. Vanessa never believed anyone would dare to question her. That arrogance would be her undoing. Asher leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. We could go straight to the regulators. Freeze everything now.
Too fast, I said.
Shock makes headlines, but I want endurance. We cut her slowly. Freeze one account. Let her scramble to cover it. When she diverts from another, we freeze that too. She'll claw at shadows until she tears herself apart. He studied me for a long moment. You're not just after justice. No, I said simply. I'm after annihilation. The first move was the injunction. We filed it ex parte, meaning Vanessa wouldn't even know until the judge's stamp dried. The documents went in under seal, the clerk's eyes widening slightly as she recognized my name. Alive, resurrected, undeniable. By the time we left the courthouse, the order was in motion. Heart Meridian Partners accounts frozen pending review. Vanessa would discover soon enough when her card declined at some over-polished boutique. I almost wished I could see her face. Almost. But the second move was better. That afternoon, I walked into the foundation's office with Ivy at my side. The receptionist, barely old enough to rent a car, looked up, startled, as I sat in the lobby. "I'm here for Vanessa," I said. She stammered. "She's not in today." "Of course not," I replied smoothly. "But I'll wait." And I did. For 11 minutes, by the clock on the wall. I sat perfectly still, Ivy curled at my feet, while employees peeked nervously from glass-walled offices. They whispered, phones in hand, doubtless calling Vanessa to report the resurrection in her lobby. At exactly 11 minutes, I stood, adjusted my jacket, and left without another word. It wasn't about seeing her. It was about making her feel me. Back at the mansion, Asher paced the study, phone buzzing with updates. The Cayman account is next. The accountant traced the transfers to a registered agent. If we subpoena, it'll take months. But he hesitated. But what? I pressed. There's another way. A contact of mine offshore intelligence. Not strictly legal. I sipped my scotch, savoring the burn. Neither was burying me alive. Call your contact. By evening, we had the Cayman records, numbered accounts linked to Vanessa's foundation, transfers disguised as consulting fees, millions siphoned away. The arrogance was breathtaking. I looked at the pages spread across the desk and felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not grief, but the cold satisfaction of accuracy. She thought signatures could erase me, I murmured. But signatures leave ink, and ink never really dries. Asher looked at me, something like awe in his eyes. You don't stop, do you? Stopping is for the dead, I said, and I refuse to die twice. That night, as I lay in the guest suite, I replayed the day's moves. The injunction, the lobby visit, the Cayman records, each one a thread pulled from the tapestry of Vanessa's empire. Soon it would unravel completely. Ivy snored softly at my side. I stroked her fur and whispered, "We're cutting the arteries, my girl. Soon there will be nothing left to pump." And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to close my eyes knowing tomorrow would bring not survival, but conquest. Revenge is not always about what you find. Sometimes it's about who finds you. The call came just after midnight. A burner phone Asher had given me buzzed on the nightstand. I answered without hesitation. A man's voice, rough with cigarettes. "Miss Hart, your daughter hired me once. She didn't pay what she owed." I sat up, heart steady as stone. "Go on." "I have information. Records. Proof. She thinks they're gone. They're not." "Where?" "Not over the phone. Meet me tomorrow. Church basement, 3rd and Main." He hung up before I could reply. I set the phone down carefully. Ivy raised her head, ears twitching, as if she too sensed the shift in the air. "Tomorrow we meet a ghost," I whispered. The church basement smelled of dust and forgotten hymnals. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering like bad conscience. The fixer sat at a folding table, hands clasped, eyes darting. He looked like a man who had lived too long in shadows, skin sallow, hair greasy. But his hands were steady when he slid a folder across the table. "Ledger," he said simply. I opened it. Inside were phone records, invoices, coded notes, and 2 recordings, grainy, muffled, but unmistakably Vanessa's voice. Ordering payments. discussing loose ends. And one note that froze the air around me. Boat.
Night. Nomon.
The same phrase Asher had seen in the investigator's files. I closed the folder and looked at the fixer. Why now?
Because she cheated me, he spat.
Because she thinks she can walk over anyone. And because you're the only one she fears. I leaned forward, voice soft and lethal. You're going to sign a statement.
Sworn. Sealed.
And if you even think of running, remember this. Vanessa may have buried me once, but I dug myself out. What do you think I'd do to a rat? His eyes widened, but he nodded quickly. I'll sign. Outside, Asher waited in the car. I handed him the folder. He flipped through it, jaw tightening when he saw the blood-stained watch photographed in evidence. My father's, he whispered. Yes, I said. And now it's proof. He looked at me, pain and fury colliding in his eyes. She killed him. She ordered him killed. I corrected. And now we have the voice to prove it. That night, I sent Vanessa a message from an untraceable account. One word, nothing more. Seen. I imagined her face as she read it. The panic. The scramble. The knowledge that her ghosts were rising one by one. 2 days later, the fixer led us to a warehouse on the edge of town. Inside, hidden beneath rotting tarps, was a safe. He handed me the combination with shaking fingers. The door groaned open. Inside were contracts, SIM cards, burner phones. And at the bottom, wrapped in a rag, the watch. Asher reached for it with trembling hands, then stopped. It smells like blood, he whispered. It is blood, I said. And now it's evidence. We returned to the mansion with the safe's contents. Spread across the study table, the artifacts looked like relics from a tomb, Vanessa's tomb. Asher stared at the watch, silent. Finally, he looked up. What do we do now? We weaponize truth, I said.
Piece by piece.
Public and private. Until she has nowhere left to stand. I slid one of the recordings into a player. Vanessa's voice filled the room, cold and clipped. Make sure the boat doesn't come back. He was asking too many questions. Asher closed his eyes, fists clenched. That's it. That's her. Yes, I murmured. And soon the world will hear it too. That night, as I walked Ivy through the silent halls, I felt no pity, no hesitation, only precision. Vanessa thought she could bury me. Instead, she had resurrected something far worse than her mother. She had resurrected her judge. Revenge ripens slowly. By the time it's ready to pick, the air changes. You can smell it before you see it. The morning of the boardroom meeting smelled like iron. Cold, metallic, unforgiving. I woke before dawn, slipped into a gray suit the color of storms, and pinned my hair into a crown that tolerated no rebellion. Ivy paced beside me, restless, as if she too sensed the atmosphere tightening. Asher was waiting downstairs, phone in hand, eyes sharp. The donors are ready, he said. So is the investigator. And the reporter. Good, I murmured. Let's starve her of oxygen. The Foundation's headquarters was a shrine to vanity. Glass walls, white marble floors polished until they blinded, art pieces meant to impress people who confuse price with value. My name had once been etched into the brass plate by the entrance. Now it bore only Hart Family Foundation. No first name, no history. My daughter had stripped even that. We walked into the lobby, Ivy trotting obediently at my heel. The receptionist nearly dropped her tablet when she saw me. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Conference room, I said coolly. Tell Vanessa her ghost has arrived. The boardroom smelled of expensive coffee and cheap nerves. Around the glossy mahogany table sat 2 major donors, a defense contractor I'd already poisoned with evidence at the gala, and a venture capitalist with hands too smooth for a man who claimed to build. Both looked at me with a mix of shock and recognition. Beside them sat the state investigator, a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that measured everything. Next to her, a reporter scribbled notes into a leather-bound book, eyes flicking between us, as if he already sensed a story that would shred careers. Vanessa swept in 5 minutes late. She wore crimson silk and diamonds, as though dressing louder could smother fear. Her eyes landed on me, and for the briefest flicker, her mask cracked. But she recovered, smiling wide as if we were at brunch instead of war. "Mother," she purred. "How dramatic." "Alive," I corrected. "And that's the drama, isn't it?" The donors shifted uncomfortably. The investigator cleared her throat. "Shall we begin?" Asher opened a folder and began sliding documents across the table. Fraudulent invoices, duplicate transfers, offshore accounts. Each page a nail hammered into Vanessa's coffin. The defense contractor frowned, flipping through the sheets. These are our donations. Redirected." Vanessa laughed lightly, too high-pitched. "Ridiculous. Fabricated." I leaned forward, letting my voice cut the air. "Then why do the invoices bear the signature of your Shell Corporation secretary? Why do the transfers trace back to your Montecito account? Why does your mother, declared legally dead, walk into this room alive to present them?" The reporter's pen scratched furiously. The investigator slid a subpoena across the table. "We'll need all communications and donor accounting records. Effective immediately." Vanessa's smile faltered. "This is an ambush." "No," I said softly. "This is air leaving the room. Feel it." She tried charm. She spoke of legacy, of grief, of how she'd only wanted to honor me by carrying on my work. She let her voice tremble at all the right moments, but it was wasted effort. The donors were no longer hers. The contractor closed the folder and looked at her with disgust. "We're pulling our funding. Effective now." The venture capitalist nodded, his smooth hands trembling. "I can't afford this stain. We're out." The reporter asked one final question. "Mrs. Hart, what do you want now?" I looked directly at Vanessa, savoring the silence that hung before my answer. Everything she stole. And then her breath. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Vanessa snapped at assistants, barked at lawyers on her phone, tried to spin a narrative that no one believed. I didn't raise my voice once. Silence is the sharpest weapon when the guilty are drowning. As we left the building, Asher exhaled slowly. "She's unraveling." "No," I corrected. "She's suffocating." There's a difference. Suffocation is slower, more deliberate. She'll claw for air until her nails break. That's when we press harder. Ivy barked once, sharp and final. Yes, I thought. The air is already leaving her. The night of the benefit arrived like a storm pretending to be calm. The museum glowed under spotlights, its glass atrium towering like a cathedral for liars. Inside, donors in tuxedos and gowns sipped champagne, laughing the brittle laughter of people who want to be photographed looking generous. This was Vanessa's kingdom. Tonight, I would shatter it. I arrived early with Asher, the investigator, the donors who had flipped, and the fixer tucked under protection like a loaded gun. We moved quietly through service corridors, positioning ourselves where the reveal would hit hardest. The auction began. Glittering items paraded across screens. Art, jewelry, experiences packaged for the wealthy. Vanessa stood on stage, glowing under the lights, her crimson lips curving as if she still owned the world. "Tonight," she declared, "we honor legacy. My mother's legacy." I stepped from the shadows, silent, and let the cameras catch me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The reporter's camera flashed. Donors turned in their seats. Vanessa's words faltered. For the first time, she looked small beneath the glass. Then the projector malfunctioned. The screen behind her flickered. Up came a slide deck. Not art, Not auction items, but line item invoices, shell company charts, emails with her signature. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Is this real? Those are her accounts. My God. Vanessa spun, eyes wide, face draining of color. This is a mistake. Sabotage. I stayed seated in the front row, sipping water as if nothing unusual was happening. Truth, I said loudly enough for the microphones to catch. That's all it is. The investigator rose, badge flashing. Vanessa Hart, we have a warrant for your communications and financial records. Gasps deepened. Phones snapped photos. Vanessa staggered back, shaking her head. No, this is a trick. Two marshals stepped through the glass doors.
She panicked.
She bolted for the side stairwell, heels clattering against stone. Asher rose instantly, following, not to save her, but to watch what she would do when stripped of audience. I walked slowly, deliberately, heels echoing in the glass atrium. The crowd parted around me, whispers rising like smoke. At the stairwell, I found her cornered. Her mascara streaked, silk gown wrinkled, hands trembling as she pointed at me. You did this, she hissed. You were supposed to stay dead. I was supposed to stay erased. I corrected. But paper burns. Flesh doesn't. Her eyes darted to Asher. Desperation. She lunged at him, hands clawing, trying to drag him down into her fall. Ivy snapped at her ankle, drawing blood. Vanessa shrieked. The marshals arrived, cuffs ready. As they pulled her away, she screamed over her shoulder. You'll never get the rest. You'll never find it. The rest? Asher asked, frowning. I stood at the base of the glass stairwell, watching her vanish into custody. My reflection stared back at me in the towering panes, sharp, merciless, undeniable. Yes, I murmured. There's always a vault. And now we'll find it. The air in the stairwell was different. Thinner. It smelled of dust, steel, and panic. Panic has a scent. It's sharp, sour, almost metallic, like the edge of a coin rubbed between fingers too long. Vanessa's heels clattered against the concrete steps as she backed away, gown snagging on the railing. Her lipstick smeared, her hair falling loose from its immaculate twist. For the first time in her life, she looked less like my daughter and more like prey. Asher stood half a step behind me, chest heaving from the chase. Ivy growled low at my side, her body taut as a bowstring. Vanessa's eyes darted between us, calculating. You think this is over? She spat, voice cracking. You have no idea what I've built. I can buy and sell every judge in this city. Judges, I said softly, taking one step forward. My heels echoed on the concrete like gunshots. Judges are men. Men are flesh. Flesh bleeds. And money doesn't clean it fast enough. Her jaw tightened. She wanted to lunge, to tear me down with claws painted in designer polish. But she didn't. She turned her gaze to Asher instead. You, she hissed. You ungrateful bastard. I raised you, fed you, gave you everything. Asher's face hardened. You murdered my father. The words landed like a slap. She flinched, then forced a laugh, brittle and false. Murder? Don't be ridiculous. It was an accident. Boats sink all the time. Then why did you call it a problem solved? He snapped. Her mouth opened, then closed. Silence fell heavy in the stairwell, broken only by Ivy's low growl. I stepped closer, until I could see the sweat beading at her temple. You buried me on paper, I said. You killed your husband on water. How many corpses did you think you could stack before the floor gave way? Her eyes flashed with something primal. Not guilt. Not regret. Survival. She lunged. Not at me, but at Asher. Her hands clawed for his throat, diamonds glinting under the harsh stairwell light. I moved faster. Years of rage sharpen reflexes. I shoved Asher behind me, Ivy snapping forward with lethal precision. Her jaws clamped around Vanessa's ankle, tearing silk and skin alike. Vanessa screamed, collapsing against the wall. Blood bloomed on the concrete, dark and spreading. The marshals burst through the stairwell door, guns drawn, eyes wide. Hands where we can see them. Vanessa writhed, shrieking. She set me up? My mother set me up. I folded my arms, calm as stone.
No, Vanessa.
You set yourself up. I'm just the mirror. The marshals cuffed her, her cries echoing off the walls like a hymn of defeat. As they dragged her past me, she twisted her head, eyes burning with venom. You'll never find the rest, she spat. Never. Her voice cracked on the last word, but the poison lingered. When the stairwell finally emptied, only silence remained. Asher leaned against the wall, pale. His hands trembled, whether from rage or relief I couldn't tell. He stared at the blood smear on the floor, then at me. The rest, he whispered. What did she mean? I looked at the stain, the dark glisten on the concrete. She meant there's more. A vault. A deeper vein of rot she thought untouchable. Ivy released a low, satisfied growl, then licked her muzzle. Blood is an honest language to her. I turned back to Asher, voice cold, deliberate. We'll find it, and when we do, her empire won't just collapse. It'll burn. We left the stairwell together, the sound of Vanessa's screams still echoing faintly, like a ghost that didn't know it was already dead. The safe smelled of mildew and iron. We found it in a storage unit 2 weeks later, hidden beneath crates labeled archives. Vanessa had always been arrogant, but arrogance makes people sloppy. The fixer handed Asher the combination, eyes flicking nervously to me as though asking for absolution. I gave him none. The dial clicked, the door groaned open. Inside lay stacks of bearer bonds, ledgers, burner phones, and envelopes fat with contracts. But at the bottom was something heavier, a letter in Vanessa's handwriting, sealed but never sent. I slid it out, broke the seal, and read aloud. To whom it may concern, my mother's death was necessary.
She was weak.
She would have squandered everything. I did what had to be done. The words burned like acid. I folded the letter carefully and set it atop the pile. This, I said, is her true inheritance. We delivered copies to 3 places at once: the court, the press, the donor coalition. No backroom deals. I burned the leverage publicly so no one could ever use it against me again. The headlines hit within hours. Heiress charged in fraud, murder conspiracy. Donors withdrew. Lawyers scrambled. Judges refused bail. Vanessa's empire crumbled, not with an explosion, but with the steady silence of rot exposed to daylight. Underscore 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 underscore. At sentencing, I wore white, a suit cut sharp as a blade, pearls gleaming at my throat. I entered the courtroom with Ivy at my heel, Asher beside me, and silence trailing like a crown. Vanessa sat at the defense table, shackled, gaunt. The crimson silk was gone, replaced by orange. She stared at me with eyes hollowed by sleepless nights, but the venom was still there. The judge read the charges: fraud, conspiracy, falsification of records, accessory to manslaughter. The fixer's testimony sealed the coffin. The recordings were the nails. Before pronouncing sentence, the judge asked if I wished to speak. I stood, my heels clicking against the tile. The courtroom hushed. Your Honor, I said, voice steady. My daughter prefers closed rooms. Lies whispered behind doors, signatures forged in shadows. I prefer light. Let it burn her. Let it leave her with nothing but truth. The judge nodded gravely and delivered the sentence, 30 years without parole. Vanessa's screams split the courtroom. You'll pay for this. You'll rot before I do. I didn't flinch. I simply turned, took Asher's arm, and walked out. Underscore, 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 underscore. The mansion was mine again. The portraits that had softened my features were removed, the forgeries burned. In their place hung the original paintings, sharp, unyielding, honest. Ivy trotted through the echoing halls as though she had always belonged. Asher managed the foundation, now stripped of corruption, reshaped into its original mission. Donors returned, drawn not by guilt, but by truth. One evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, I stood at the balcony overlooking the gardens. The air was still, heavy with the scent of roses. Asher joined me, silent. For a long time, we watched the light fade. Finally, he spoke. Do you feel finished? I considered the question, the silence between us thick. Revenge isn't about feeling, I said at last. It's about restoration. And I restored everything, including myself. I lifted my glass in a silent toast. Ivy barked once, sharp and final. The house was silent again, but this time the silence was mine. And in that silence I knew my daughter was gone, my legacy was mine, and the world would never again mistake me for dead. Thank you for joining us for another powerful episode of Her True Stories. Mrs. Hart's journey reminds us that it's never too late to fight back, to reclaim what's rightfully yours, and to transform pain into purpose. If this story inspired you, please subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and share it with someone who needs to hear that their story isn't over yet. Remember, if you're ready to start your own comeback story, our book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain, is waiting for you. Real strategies, real hope, and real transformation are possible. It has helped thousands of people find the strength to rebuild after betrayal, loss, and heartbreak. Click the link in the description to start your journey back to yourself today. You deserve a life of peace, purpose, and power, and we're here to help you claim it. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than your circumstances, braver than your fears, and more powerful than anyone who tries to diminish your light.
Keep shining.